I'm Dean Anderson, a lived experience clinical counselor who has spent the last decade specializing in addiction and substance use. Figuring out how to fit in and go out and participate in social events is one of the most scariest things for somebody who is in active recovery, and we're going to talk more about that today. So we have some tips and tricks that we're going to share with you on how to deal with getting ready for a social event and participating in a social event. However, first we got to talk a little bit about what that looks like and understanding when we should decide whether or not we even go or participate in these events. One of the things that stands out is people will attend one social event and feel good or feel confident, depending on the social event, and then they will take that as rule of thumb that if I was good at one social event, therefore I must be good at other social events. And before we decide whether or not we're going to go to a social event, a Christmas party, a work function, traveling, whatever it may be, we need to recognize some of the things that are in place. One problem is impulse control. Our impulse control is going to be different varying the situations and varying on what's going on. And you'll kind of see that when we talk about these tips and tricks. However, just because one event went well doesn't mean all events will go well. So I like to look at this like having an injury or a broken leg. If you had a broken leg and you wanted to go back out to become a runner, it would make sense that you would slowly put a little bit of weight on it, explore it, to do it with some safety measures in place while you're exploring to see what works and what doesn't work, or where there's suffering and where there's pain, where there's discomfort in a safe environment. And then as you continue to expose that, you get stronger and better at it. We're not going to pretend like we're just going to go sit in a basement somewhere and lock ourselves down for the rest of our lives, because we know that there's going to be substance use and alcohol throughout the world. So we got to figure out how to coexist with that. But we need to understand that part first and make sure that we know it's okay to say no. The same as if I had a broken leg and someone said, hey, Dean, can you drive me to work tomorrow? I'd be like, no, I can't drive. I would just not participate in those activities. I would have to accommodate and make changes while I'm healing. The early stages of recovery is the same. I have to figure out and make sure that I'm looking at that in a balanced way, to look at slowly, incrementally working up to those things. It's not something that just starts right out of the gates. So a little bit of patience is required, and you'll get there, I promise. But we're going to talk more about those tips and tricks and the things that we can use to help us lean into these social experiences. So tip number one is knowing your triggers, knowing your sore spots, knowing the areas of concern that you might have that would put you into a reckless place. So these are things that we're going to do to prepare in advance prior to going. We're not going to wait until we're in the event to figure out what my triggers are. So we know them, you know them, and sometimes depending on the drug of choice, I need to make sure that that drug of choice is not going to be present in the event that I'm going to, or if it is present, I need to make other things. But I need to know what my triggers are and understand them. So those could be emotional, they could be psychological, they could be physical, they could be environmental. There could be things in my space that are triggering. Sometimes it's even just the sight of something else. And the better I understand and know those triggers, the more I can make sure in early days that we figure out how to manage our environment or where we're going, to make sure that I'm not going to put myself into that impulse control place that we were talking about before. So when we attend a social event and there's none of those triggers in place and I don't have it, it could be very successful. But then I go to another event and all those triggers are in place, or those things are happening, and then we go, well, why is this different? What didn't work? So if we're aware of those triggers in advance, it gives us a much greater opportunity to be able to head them off at the pass and create a plan and put something in place to make sure that we don't fall prey to them. Bringing somebody to the event is number two. A trusted loved one, someone that you care about, someone that you know participates in sober living the way that you do. can be a really easy way to create a barrier because we have some accountability, we have somebody to lean on, we have somebody to spend time with, and it can make sure that we have a sense of safety in that environment. So bringing somebody with you, or even somebody that you know you would never use in front of, right? So if I in my drinking days had went to a house party with my grandma, I probably wouldn't have picked up a drink knowing that grandma was in the room, because she knows and I have some accountability to her. So the greater the accountability and the more important that relationship is, the less likely that the impulse control or you would use in front of that individual, the safer it is. So that's why some people be like, I've gone to one event and I did really well and it was fine, but I went to another one and I wasn't. If you look at it, you'll see that the person that you were with had a big impact on that. So it was like, I was with my wife and my wife doesn't want me to drink. So that was easy for me to not drink. And then the other event, I went with my buddy and my buddy was one of my drinking buddies. So then it turned into problematic behavior very quickly. So one of the best ways that we can make sure that we're safe is to have an accountability partner, bring somebody with us. And number 3 is planning your exit strategy, or even better, plan your exit strategy and show up late. Show up late, leave early. The less amount of time we're spending in that environment, the easier it can be. Sometimes we think that we have an expectation of just showing up, and it's like my boss wants me to be at that party and it's important for my career. Well, I could show up a little bit late and have some reason that I was at the office late, making the company better or whatever it is, and then I show up late, and then I have an exit strategy. So the exit strategy is probably a little bit more crucial than showing up late, but the exit strategy allows me to have the emotional capacity to say, I'm going to leave. So if I don't have a way out and I'm in a process of struggling with what's happening in the environment and I'm emotionally flushed or I'm feeling triggered, and then I'm trying to come up with an excuse or a strategy to get out of there, I'm probably going to become overwhelmed. And sometimes going to my drug of choice might be the easier way to deal with that situation. However, if I planned it in advance, and the more I plan things in advance, then I can use my forward-thinking mind to step into the situation and interrupt it and be like, I've got a plan. I've got a way to get out of here. Now's my opportunity to put that in place. And for some people, it's having somebody call them or pretending that they have a text message. We want to encourage honesty, but in these scenarios, sometimes we've got to stretch a little bit to make ourselves safe. And I think that's okay. Or having a reason that I've got to go. I've got to pick up my kids from school. I've got to get out of here. I've got this thing. I've got to work tomorrow morning. I've got a doctor's appointment. There's all these reasons that you can have in place, not only to have that planned for yourself in your mind of what you're going to say, but you can set the tone for that when you arrive or when you RSVP to the event. Someone says, hey, I need you to come. You say, I can come. That's great. But just so you know, I'm telling you in advance, I have to leave early. So then when you show up on that day, you remind them again, hey, thanks for having me. I'm going to remind you, I have to leave early because I have this thing. So when it comes time to go, there's no fear, there's no worry about leaving because you've already set the tone. They know you're going. You don't feel obligated to stay. And then you can just be like, hey, I'm getting out of here. And then if you feel triggered, you feel like you're in an unsafe place, you can insert that exit strategy and put it in play to get you the heck out of Dodge. This is going to sound strange, but number 4 is rehearsing your response. It's very similar to what we were just talking about having an exit strategy. If someone's going to ask me if I want to use, if I want to drink, if I want to participate in activities that I know are unhealthy for me, it is very difficult sometimes in the moment for us to come up with a response or one that makes sense. So, or we just say no, and then when we say no outright, and we have every right to just say no, but sometimes the individual that we're saying no to can get repetitive or say, how come, what's going on? And then start probing or asking questions. That becomes a little bit more difficult because on the fly now we're trying to make stuff up. That feels uncomfortable. And I know from my own personal experience that has led into trouble because after being asked a couple times, I go, you know what, screw it, let's just do this, because my dopamine and impulse control will get out of hand. And then I end up saying, I'm not going to bother arguing with this person. I'm just going to do what I wanted to do prior to anyway. But if I have a response in play, in my mind of what I was going to do in advance, then this turns into an opportunity for me to step in and say, I'm not doing it because I'm on medication, because I have to get up early, because for women, it can be, I'm trying to get pregnant. I mean, it's not always the best thing, but, to use if you're not planning on getting pregnant, that is. But there's things that we can say that are very clear that people just won't second guess. They'll be like, oh, okay. I'm trying to get my health better. I'm trying to do certain things. And the individual will just stop asking. So when you rehearse these, it just becomes that much easier to execute them in the moment. We get caught blindsided or get caught trying to make up these excuses in the moment, and then we end up tripping over them. And it can even feel shameful that I don't feel good enough because I'm sitting here trying to figure this out and they're judging me or they're looking at me. But having a rehearsed response makes it so much easier because you're like, oh, I thought about this. I know how I feel about this. I recognize the value in this. So it becomes really easy to execute those responses. And when I say practice them, I mean like you can write them down. You can even look at specific individuals. I know that people will be like, I'm going to go, and I know that, George is going to be there. I don't know anybody named George, but let's say that George is going to be there. And I know if George is there, he's always the one that wants me to drink and do all of this stuff and the other thing. And I go, oh, okay. So then I think about my very specific response to George. What am I going to say to George? Now, if it's people that I trust and I love, maybe I tell them the truth and I say, you know what, I'm struggling with something. I'm trying to not do that right now. That could be the case as well, but also preparing for that and recognizing who you're going to tell and who you're not going to tell and who gets that information and who doesn't get that information, who gets that prior to, alleviates a lot of stress in the moment. So it can make it so much easier. So don't forget to practice your responses. So one of the things that a lot of experts would suggest is eating before you go. This is relevant for alcohol because if I feel full, the likelihood of me consuming alcohol is less. My dopamine receptors might be going off because I feel satiated. There are a few different reasons. It might even, sometimes we get, a little sedated when we got a full stomach, so we're not as amped up. It can be soothing and comforting to put those things in place and put them into our stomach and feel a little bit full. So I, seen these experiences, have people share those experiences with me that could be beneficial. However, we're not always going to places that we can eat before or we can't. So one of the things that we find extremely important is recognizing hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. It's an acronym. I'll pop it up on the screen here for you. So hungry, angry, lonely, tired. The acronym is HALT. And what we want people to do is to recognize before they go, as part of preparation to going out into a social event, recognize these 4 things. And if they are in play, or more than one of them are in play when I'm going out to be social, it's probably a good idea that I put a pin in it or wait to go or solve these problems before I go. So if I am in an emotional state of being hungry, and some people call it hangry, we can get emotionally charged, the process of not feeling full or not feeling well or needing sustenance. And that can lead to emotional dysregulation. Same with feeling lonely. If you're already lonely and feeling disconnected, and then you go to a party and to a function that you're feeling separated from because you're not participating in the substances that are at play, and you're already feeling lonely, it might want to make you try and feel like you'll fit in and then lean towards the substance again. So making sure that you feel connected. This goes back to one of the other tips that said bring somebody with you. So get connected first. Bring someone that you know that will be with you and support you, that you can participate in the event with, and maybe not feel so lonely. There's other things that we can do. I encourage you to look up other ways to make sure that you don't feel lonely, or not don't feel it. You can feel it, but make sure that it's not leading the charge of my motivations. So there's ways to feel more connected and to feel a greater sense of belonging, which is really important. And then tired. Sometimes it's sick and tired. I'm tired of stuff. I'm tired of things. And I personally am tired of taxes. So there's things that we can get tired of. Most of this is more about the loss of sleep or feeling unrested. Because it could be I slept well, but I had a busy day. I've been really full. I've had a lot going on, lots of stresses, lots of moving parts in my life. And I might be just tired in general. And if that's the case, then maybe taking a little rest or having a nap or, meditating or something prior to the event before you go into that space. And then angry is if you're upset, if you've got something going on that's really upset you and you're feeling disconnected, that's probably more of a time to find somebody that you could regulate with, or talk to a counselor or a sponsor, or talk to somebody else before you go into an environment. If you're anything like me, I know most of the mistakes I've ever made in my life were while I was in a state of anger and I wasn't feeling regulated. So our decision making in a space of anger decreases dramatically. So if you're feeling any of these hungry, angry, lonely, or tired prior to the event, make sure you figure those things out, or maybe it's a good idea to just stay home. That's not just for the event. This is for part of any space where I would go that might be at high risk, incorporating this quick way to recognize where I might dysregulate. There's more to it, and I encourage you to look deeper into all of those topics, but this is just a real quick pinpoint, where I can see that there might be a concern. So make sure you check that out. So those are 5 tips on how to prepare for and get ready for an event. And there's more. I'm sure that there's more. And if you have any more, we'd be happy to hear them. But those are the 5 core ones that we're aware of off the hop that are important to us. There's 5 tips that we're going to give you now that are relevant to being in the space. So there's before the event and then during the event. So during the event, there are a bunch of different things that we can do. And probably one that makes the most sense and is the most common is if it's drinking, or even if it's not drinking, just a drug of choice, but keeping a non-alcoholic beverage in your hand at all times makes it easy for people to not want to ask you if you want to drink or trying to fill your hands with something. So if I'm sitting there with empty hands, a good host is always going to be like, hey, what can I get you? What do you need? Can I give you something? Right? So keeping our hands full, it's not always a non-alcoholic drink. It might just be a bottle of water. It doesn't have to be a zero alcohol beer or something to have to fit in. But there are ways that you can use that as a tool. I know people that will go to a bar or a restaurant for a social event or a hotel. They will go to the bartender when they very first arrive and say, whenever I order soda water, I want you to bring me a soda water in a rock glass with a piece of lime on it so it looks like I'm drinking an alcoholic beverage. We don't always encourage that you have to do that, but sometimes that's what people need to just for people to not ask them why they're not drinking. And if that's what you got to do to get by, that's great. Then do that. And also keeping our hands full can have, I even do it right now. I'm doing it like it. Yeah. It can be soothing. Keeping my hands full can also make me feel occupied. It can, some people need that to slow their mind down. If I'm doing something with my hands, it can slow my mind down. So you can also do that with a plate of food or having something in your hands that would make it so that people look at you and go, oh, okay, he's engaging, he's participating in the event, or she is participating in the event. So it is important to kind of keep something in your hands. It's also something to note that when somebody says, can I get you a drink? Or do you want a beer? Do you want something? One of the quickest ways to switch that is to say, instead of just saying no, say no to the alcoholic beverage that they're offering, but then offer us an alternative solution so that they stop asking you. So they say, hey, do you want a beer? You say, no, but I would love a Coke. That person won't turn around and say, why not a beer? They'll usually just be like, oh, I'm going to focus on what you asked for. So it's like, do you want a shooter? You go, no, but I'd love a glass of water. Okay. Most people will lean towards what it is that you've asked for, opposed to focusing on what they just asked you about. So that redirection, this is part of one of the other skills of practicing my responses, is if you recognize this response and then you're in the event and somebody asks, you just say, no, but I would love a drink of water. And that can make things go much smoother and keep your hands full. Number 2 is to stay busy. I think that it can be a struggle when we get to these social events, that most people want to be a wallflower. They don't want to draw any attention to themselves, because if I draw attention to myself, then people might start asking questions or recognize that I'm not being the same as I normally would be or act the way I would act. So the natural response is to sink back in. I always think of, the Homer Simpson meme where he sinks back into the into the bush. And I don't think that that's always ideal, because it reinforces the idea that I don't belong or there's something wrong with me in those situations. So keeping busy can help to counteract that. And one of the things that we can do is just contribute and chip in. And by that, it's like help the host, or maybe clear off a table, or, help with the dishes, play, if they're playing board games, jump in and play one of the board games. Do some of the activities that are there, clear a table, whatever it may be. And then when I'm staying busy, it's not drawing attention to me. It just shows that I'm there and doing things and I'm participating. And the conversation that I'm trying to avoid, it gets avoided in a bit of a different way. But I also have a presence. And it's not that I'm hiding in the corner and trying to avoid everything. And then if I'm there and I just want, to get through this event in a safe way, keeping busy kind of helps the time go by, right? On top of that, I feel pretty good about myself when I keep busy and I participate and help with the event and what's going on. I get a little bit of a boost, and then I'm sure that the host of the party or the event is super grateful. Unless you're at a hotel and then you start walking into the hotel kitchen and doing that stuff, they don't like that. But there's certain ways that we can certainly chip in and help. Number 3 is find the right people. I know we said in part of the preparation that we want to make sure that we invite some of the people that are there, but we're not just going to always go with one person and then just stick with that one person. We're going to want to explore, and we're going to want to do a little bit of exposure therapy and engage with the individuals that are at the event, but we have to be able to find those right people. And part of that process is kind of scanning the room and engaging with people. I know when I go, I will look for individuals that maybe have a bottle of water in their hand, or I can see that they're not drinking. And they usually become very easy to engage because you know that they're not drinking. So you go and stand next to them and you start talking, and we can find the people that we know are more in line with the behaviors that we want to participate in at that event. And we can also see that there's probably people that we're going to know and recognize that might have a similar journey to us, just through degrees of separation. I know when I go to an event, I can look and be like, oh, there's this person over here that I know, quit drinking a couple of years ago or stopped doing that. I'm going to go gravitate towards that person so that I know that they're a safe individual. I can see where there's people that are maybe higher risk or more likely to cause concern, and I just gravitate away from them and towards the people that have a lifestyle that I'm trying to accommodate for myself. So surrounding ourselves with the right people. Not only that, we can also recognize, kind of a positive, negative response, because there are people that are standing in the corner that I might gravitate to that are having a drink of water, but they're also very negative, or they're very judgmental, or they're very aggressive, or whatever that may be. If I'm trying to get through this night and I want to do it in a healthy way, being around somebody who is in a negative state or who is upset, angry, bothered, probably isn't the best. So good idea to kind of gravitate away from those individuals and make sure that we just stay around the right people when I'm in those events to give myself the best chance. Number 4 is the practice of mindfulness. Now, we can do an entire episode on the value of this. However, if we're in a space where we're trying to regulate, and that's really the big concern here, is being into the social environment and still being able to feel safe and regulate and feel comfortable so that I don't end up going to my old coping strategy, which is drugs and alcohol, then it's a really good idea to figure out ways to create mindfulness and slow myself down and feel good about what's happening. So in these events, and this might be a part of preparation as well, or it could be both, but in these events or prior to these events, figuring out ways that you could be mindful in those situations to participate in a different way. So even if it's you are feeling stuck and you're in the back corner, instead of getting lost up in our thoughts about I don't fit in or there's something wrong here or everybody's doing all the things that I want to do, if I spend a moment to be over observing or looking at things, or sometimes people do grounding techniques and they'll find all the blue things in the room and count all the blue things in the room, and this is blue, that's blue, that's blue. What's happening while I'm doing this mindfulness strategy of recognizing or observing my environment or counting things, then my brain isn't going off into all of those scary things, and my central nervous system, my heart rate, my breathing will slow down with my thinking, and then I don't get overwhelmed and it doesn't feel so scary to be in that space. So practicing the idea of being mindful helps with that. And that can go with all sensations. If I'm feeling good enough to do so, I can use my sight. I can be really mindful listening to music. The music's on, it's a great tune. Instead of thinking about what's going on in the room with, all that angst, is really just sit and listen to the music, listen to the lyrics, listen to the beat, tap my fingers, tap my hands, and just put everything I can into the music and what's going on. That mindfulness strategy will take away from the discomfort that we're having. This can also go into breathing strategies, taking some slow, deep breaths and slowing my breathing down, being more mindful of what it is my body and what's happening, and just slow things down a bit. These are all strategies and techniques that should be practiced, and you should learn these things as part of your addiction recovery, but applying them during a special event or during a social event, a Christmas party, whatever it may be, can help a lot. Not just there, but you ever go to Costco shopping on a Saturday? It's a great place to practice mindfulness. So this is a great tool to have right across the board. Number 5, and probably one of the most important things that gets overlooked, is just have fun. Holy moly, we think that we got to go to these things and it's got to be excruciating. And teaching ourselves that I can have fun, teaching myself that I can enjoy myself and I can still participate and I can dance and I can remember why I'm there in the first place. It's somebody's birthday. It's a special occasion. It's a bar mitzvah. I don't know what it is, but whatever the event is, participate in the event and have fun, engage. What is everybody doing? Everybody's dancing? Go dance. I know it sounds like an oversimplification. It's not always that easy when we're wrapped up in ourselves, but every single time that we do those or participate in those things, we teach ourselves something. We teach ourselves that I have the capacity to do that. And I think that as we transition through substance use into addiction, we start to teach ourselves that I can't have fun without that substance. So here is the opportunities to participate and just have fun, engage, play the game, laugh, connect with people, and enjoy yourself. Let's not forget that part of going to events is reviewing how it went after. This is something that gets neglected frequently. So when I go to an event and it happens and it goes well or doesn't go well, or what I liked or what I didn't like, it's crucial that I take some time to defrag that and go through what happened, what was going on, reward myself, give myself a pat on the back to be like, I made it through that thing and I did a good job and here's what worked for me. And I did have some fun and I did have some laughter. We can also reflect on the behavior of other people. You'd be shocked at how many people come in and sit in my office and they talk about, going to an event and they thought that everybody drank the way they drank. And then when they went to an event and observed it, they were like, nobody drank the way I drank. I thought everybody was drinking the way I did. But now that I have this observation, I could see it's different. So breaking that down after the fact allows us to have a different perspective on what these things mean. And I can also reinforce the character traits and the skills and the tools and the things I put in place to make that event successful. And then with some help or some objective viewpoints, we can look at what didn't go well or what I might have done differently. And then that planning that we said were the first 5 things that we talked about now becomes easier because now I can incorporate the things that went well or didn't go well into my next plan, and then so on and so forth. And then the same as the broken leg analogy, I get better and better. I can put a little bit more weight on it. I can participate in events. And then I feel like I'm doing a holistic approach to this, to preparing, participating, reviewing, and then repeating and going back to that again. So it's super important that we go and we review these events after the fact. So with all of that great information, all those tips, I encourage you to go out and participate in your social events with all these cautions in place and do it in a safe way, and don't lock yourself in your basement. Participate in your life. Let's not forget that when we are going to these events, it's crucial that, when we have that exit strategy, that we sometimes need to bring ourselves there. If we're counting on someone else to get us out of there, if we're counting on a ride from someone else, then we're stuck. So sometimes we got to be like, I'm going to get myself there, but that also means I can leave when I'm ready to go. And you always have that exit strategy that's planned in place. One of the other things that's not considered is don't be a designated driver. It's a wonderful thing to contribute to the community and be a designated driver. However, if I'm put in these situations that are highly triggering and then I've got to wait for everybody else to finish drinking before I can leave, then I'm putting myself into a high-risk situation. You can be a designated driver at some point, but in early days, just leave it off the radar. Don't participate in being a designated driver, because you're usually just going to put yourself at more risk. And then all of a sudden now you're the designated driver and you've been drinking, and then it can cause a lot of problems and put more people at risk. So don't be a designated driver. Bring your own car. Come late, leave early.